It's time to lock in. We're talking SEC, college football, and more. This is AP as we see it.
I'm all about that action. I'm all about that action. I'm all about that action. I said I'm all about that action.
I'm AP Steadham from LA, Lower Alabama. This is AP as we see it, a syndicated weekly 1-hour show discussing the Southeastern Conference, keeping an eye on the national college football scene and other sports. Welcome to another edition of AP as we see it. And we'd like to direct our audience to our social media platforms. We're on YouTube at AP as we see it. That's our video broadcast weekly and all the interviews that we conduct at the various events. And we're also on Spotify, where we archive the audio, and 20 to 25 stations around the Southeast. You can check your local listings on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And we're also have the AP as we see it in our personal account at AP Steadham on Facebook, Instagram, and X accounts, where we send you the links to all the interviews and our weekly show. But we'd like to welcome you to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We're at the 2026 NFL Draft, and the last time it was held in Pittsburgh was 1947 for the 1948 season. So that's decades in a century. That last time it occurred in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I hadn't been here in a very long time myself, so we're enjoying the good weather. We had a chance to visit with some SEC players today. You can watch those interviews on our YouTube channel, as always, at AP as we see it. We spoke to Mansour Delane, Keldrick Falk. We didn't have a chance to speak with him from Auburn. Hopefully tomorrow evening we will, after he's drafted, hopefully. Colton Hood, the defensive back from Tennessee. We spoke to Ty Simpson, the quarterback from Alabama, and also the offensive tackle, Caden Proctor. So you can watch those interviews, as well as some other players that were here from various conferences from around the country. But check out our YouTube channel at AP as we see it. So we'll have all those interviews this week from right here in Pittsburgh. We love coming to the draft. I've covered it in New York. I was there for 50 years in New York, and then they branched out maybe 10 to 15 years ago, and I've been to every city since they left New York except Dallas and Philadelphia. I had some business on those weekends and at the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame, but I missed those two particular cities, Dallas and Philadelphia. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Greer's Markets, 29 locations in Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, serving the Gulf Coast and beyond for 110 years now. They have Lucy's Famous Recipes online in her book. You can buy that online or at the store, purchase at all the locations. And remember, family, friends in football and basketball, baseball, softball, and the NFL draft. That's a winning tradition at Greer's, where you can score big savings on the fresh meats and the produce and more for your game day spreads. Remember, groceries to go. If you can't make it to one of those 29 locations, click on the groceries to go, and you can have all those items delivered to your home, your office, your venue of choice. And remember, they have the coloring contest for the children. So they're going to announce that winner April 25th, I believe, on a Saturday. So stop by the counter so they can get the items so they can draw and enter that contest for the children. And check the weekly ads. And for all you folks out there celebrating the special occasions and the holidays and the birthdays and the anniversaries, check every week for the groceries online that are on sale and in person at the 29 locations. So remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it. So let's get on to our show. As I said, we're in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at the 2026 NFL Draft. Looking forward to our getting more interviews on the evenings that the draft will be held. The first round is on Thursday evening. The second and third round is on a Friday. Rounds 4 through 7 are on Saturday. And most of the time, the players that are invited, and there's 16 that have accepted so far the invitation. Like I said, 5 are from the SEC. They'll stay on the first night, and if they're not drafted, more than likely they'll leave. I always try to encourage the players that I've contacted through the years to stay on on Friday, because it's round 2, and you'll probably walk across the stage and have that moment with the commissioner of the NFL, and you'll celebrate that for years. But sometimes they leave, they're not happy that they weren't selected in the first round, but it behooves them to stay on that second night so they can have their moment for historical purposes, to show all their family members and friends throughout the coming decades. So that's what I always suggest to them. But anyhow, there's some big news that was coming out of Tuscaloosa this week. They had extensions for the University of Alabama football coach Kalen DeBoer, another couple of years until 2033, and another couple of years for Nate Oates until 2032. And I don't know why that was necessary on the part of Alabama to sign those coaches to additional years. I believe that Alabama, if their coach comes to them with a chance to leave for another school, Alabama can counter those offers. And I just don't think that you should sign coaches for these long-term deals, because then you're beholden to them if things head south and they have some downturn in their wins and losses. Especially the win column, of course, the wins more L's than W's, and then you're on the hook for all those millions of dollars. And I just think there's no need. They're already signed up until the next decade or so. Just leave it as is, and you'll be fine, and let it all play out. And pun intended, of course, let that all play out and see what happens, and see if they can continue to compete and win at the University of Alabama. But if they want to leave, I'm sure their lawyer can come up with a way. There's buyouts involved, but I just don't see the need to sign up for these long-term contracts. I think it's not wise and prudent for the University of Alabama to make that commitment. They're committing millions of dollars each and every year. If the coach questions their commitment to the coach, I think that's foolish on that coach's part, because you're getting paid millions and millions of dollars to coach at the University of Alabama, one of the top brands in all of college athletics at this point in history, 2026. But anyhow, so we're gonna look at the draft, and from the SEC perspective, you'll notice through the years, Alabama, the SEC has dominated in the draft. Alabama through the years has done quite well under Nick Saban. But for instance, in 2025, 79 players from the SEC were selected. Now we know there's 16 teams and not 14. 2 teams came on starting in the 2024 season. 79 in 2025, 59 in 2024, 62 in 2023, 65 in 2022 and 21. That was the record at the time, 65. Now it's ascended to 79. So the SEC has done quite well. They've always been the leader in the NFL draft. But what is that going to be the case within the next 5 years? We see the Big Ten with 18 teams. They also, had more teams come on board in the same years that the SEC brought on Oklahoma and Texas. Oklahoma and Texas made it 16 for the SEC. But are they still going to dominate with being first in the draft with having so many players? Well, we shall see. But I think another situation to look at, and we'll discuss this more in our last segment 4, but I think the transfer in the NLI, name, image, and likeness, that has changed the draft for some of the other teams that were not as dominant, because now they're able to pay players. I think the effect that it will have on the NFL draft for schools from the SEC that were in the middle of the draft with numbers or below, I think those numbers will increase. Will the dominant teams like Alabama, LSU, Georgia, for instance, will they stay the same? Will they slightly drop? Do they have a chance to better their numbers? We shall see. But anyway, I just want to discuss our guest that we're going to have in segment 2 and 3 is Jeff Bowers, a longtime friend of the show. Jeff has been 15 plus years. Excuse me. He's been the draft analyst and researcher for the Ticket in Dallas, KTCK. And he's very good and knowledgeable and thorough. And I like the fact that he's a researcher as well as an analyst, and he's able to provide perspective over the course of decades that he's been doing this, decade plus, like I said, 15 plus years. And Jeff Bowers, he's out of Dallas, Texas. So he's going to be our guest in segment 2 and 3. And then we're going to continue our discussion about the NFL draft as it pertains to the SEC. And we're going to also bring up some other items that are on the agenda for college athletics and college football in particular. The 5-for-5 rule, where they're trying to limit the time. You're going to have 5 years to play 4 instead of the normal 4 years to play 5. Their executive order is proposing the 5 years to play 5. And we'll go over all the scenarios where there's some minimal exceptions as well. And then, of course, the college football playoff. We know that an agreement could not be made among all the conferences. And, of course, the SEC and the Big Ten have total command of that process. And they weren't able to reach an agreement last December. So that's still a prime point of discussion for all the college football teams at 130 plus. They want to see if they could add some more teams. I don't think there's a question they'll add more teams, but we'll discuss that in segment 4 when we come back after segment 2 and 3 with Jeff Bowers, our guest coming up. Jeff Bowers from the Ticket in Dallas, KTCK. He will be our guest for segment 2 and 3, and we'll be right back after these messages with more of AP as we see it.
Hi, I'm AP Steadham for Greer's Markets. If you're planning a big party or for every day, shop at Greer's for delicious food, beverages, and snacks. Save time and money by checking on Greers.com and use Groceries to Go to get your Greer's groceries delivered. Look at the weekly ad for more information. 29 locations in Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, serving the region since 1916. Remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it.
And we're back with AP as we see, and we have a very special guest, a friend of the show for many, many years, Jeff Bowers, an NFL draft analyst. And I'm going to say this also, researcher. I love that part of it, for 15 plus years for the Ticket in Dallas, KTCK, also the sports narrative on the X account. And hey, Jeff, so glad to have you on AP as we see it again.
Man, AP, it's been a minute since we've been together. I've these last few years, they've been stationing us out at the Star in Frisco, so we're out there trying to help Jerry to get all these draft picks done right, and so we don't get to see face to face anymore. So it's good to see your face, my man.
Yes, sir.
To be on.
Yes, sir. Hey, I guess we'll start off with the SEC. That's our show primarily. So any SEC stories about players that you would like to relate to our audience with reference to the NFL draft?
Well, this year's draft is so wild. This is one of those weird years, and we've kind of been building to this a little bit with of course all of the money in college football now and all of that. It's kind of held down a couple of years of draft and of course COVID too, where the kids were getting the 6-year extensions, and we've seen all that, and obviously there at Ole Miss, the quarterback there, a lot of talk about Chambliss, whether he was going to come out or not, and then ultimately won his court case, which why court cases are involved in my sports, I don't know, but here we are, and and so it's just it's changed the way the draft is evaluated. It's changed what these kids' motivations were. I can remember, AP, back when I started this thing. You look at these draft shirts that are nice and old, over 10 years old. One of the first questions we'd talk to a prospect, and one of the first questions out there at the Senior Bowl when you and I were in Mobile, we'd say, "Hey, when you get that money, what do you want? What's the first thing you're going to do?"
Yes.
I asked that of a kid at the Shrine Bowl 2 years ago, and he says, "I already have my money. I'm good. I have businesses. I have investments. These kids are commodities now, man. They got more money than you and me combined, AP." So that's the thing about it, is it's changed. Now you got to really go for the love of the game. You got to get into these kids' characters and all of this type of stuff. And so it's changed the entire dynamic of the way the draft works. And now it's gotten to the place where teams are starting to react to that. And this season of all, people have held their cards close to the vest. Nobody knows what after pick number 1, which is Francisco Mendoza, and we all know that, and he's going to kiss his mama, and it's going to be a beautiful scene. After that, this thing is wide open, and it's going to be a blast on Thursday night.
Oh yeah, Fernando. Sure, I love Fernando. I saw him play when he was at University of California. I was trying to convince everybody, look, I found this quarterback. I think that
Yes,
was
sir.
not heard of across the country. I just want you to just take a moment to watch him play, and so we know the rest of the story. On the SEC side, I think two of the biggest question marks, it just so happens to be that I've been hearing, is Ty Simpson, the University of Alabama quarterback.
Yes,
Let's
sir.
discuss him first, and then Caden Proctor, the offensive tackle. But Ty Simpson, how would you have him evaluated, and what has been have you heard a consensus about when he might be selected, what round per se?
Ty's an interesting kid. He had big offers to stay in school and decided to go ahead and come out. He's only had the 1 year of starting experience. We've seen that at Alabama before, where a guy sits for 4 years and then he finally gets his chance and steps out and does well. And look, Ty was great for the first half of last year, as your listeners
Yes,
obviously all know and watch and viewers that he was great. Then he just got beat up. His weapons kind of went away and it kind of fell apart as it went down the stretch and obviously into the playoff. So
yes,
teams are saying, man, it's a short sample size, but we love the processing, we love he's coach's kid, all of these things, right? And
right.
so there's a lot of that to it, but it's where you take a chance on a guy like that. He's a little bit short, he's 6'2", the arm's good but not great, all of these things. So honestly, Ty's going to be one of those guys that we've heard him as high up as 16 to the Jets and teams that are quarterback needy. I think that's a little too rich. I think that late first round is when you're really going to start seeing him, and you're going to see some of those teams like the Jets or the Cardinals or teams that you commonly hear. But really, where I think it's interesting for a place like Ty that would be his best place to land would be a team where he can sit for a year behind a veteran, drop into a system. Look at a team like the Rams with Matthew Stafford,
Yes,
near in the end. Look at a team like Pittsburgh with Aaron Rodgers. Who knows if he's coming back again, but we're not going to get into that. But like
right.
a place like that where he can go sit for a year, learn, and then move forward, much like Jalen Hurts did. He went to Philly, sat for a season behind Wentz. Then they moved on. They gave him the opportunity, and obviously we've seen what Jalen Hurts has turned into. So I think a place like that is where he could go, but the other interesting part of it for him, especially, is that the quarterbacks, there's this year's quarterback, all the quarterbacks stayed in school. When we started talking about the kid from Oregon and Arch and all those guys, and so uh, now that with the quarterback class, basically once you get past obviously Mendoza and then Simpson, it's a big fall off. You've got the Garrett Nussmeier questions and the
Yeah.
injuries that he had and then this week, I don't know if you heard this story, but they found out that he had a cyst in his spine, and that's what was causing him all the pain and all the injuries that caused him to really struggle down the stretch last year. Well, that can be fixed like that. So a week before the draft, all of a sudden you get a complete new evaluation on a player and how fast these teams can kind of move and shake. That's how you're going to see those teams really be successful. To your point on Caden Proctor, um, one of the things I love about the draft, and one of the things that Peter King, the great former SI writer, used to say, is that the draft changes and morphs with every pick. That one team has an evaluation of somebody and they love this guy and they think like a guy like Caden Proctor, they think he plug in left tackle, can play
Yes,
great, he's a road grader, all these things. And another team can say, man, we think he's a guard, that we don't even think he can play tackle in the pros. And
right.
so you just have this different evaluation. I know for a fact from my sources um, that the Browns really like Proctor, and they think he can be their starting left tackle. Now they don't want to take him at 6 where they pick, but they do pick at 24. But will he make it to 24? That's a really good question. The other tackles in this class, a couple other SEC guys. You've got the Monroe Freeling out of Georgia. Again, a kid with all the skill set you want. Got the great arms. He's got the feet. He's got everything you want. The problem is he only played like 12 games this season. He didn't even
Small
play a
sample
full season.
size.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so is he what he was there, or can he hold up? There's all of these question marks. So you just don't have a lot of tape, and so it just gets really fascinating where a team can say, I know like the Lions also really like Proctor, but they like him as a right tackle and they want to move Penei Sewell, their all pro tackle, over to the left side. So every team evaluates differently. Everybody looks at it differently, and that's what makes the draft so much fun, is because all 32 teams are competing on the same field at the same time, and one team doing something can cause total chaos, and that's what I love. That's what I love about the draft.
Jeff Bowers, NFL draft analyst and researcher for over 15 years for the Ticket in Dallas, KTCK. Jeff, we got about 2.5 minutes for this segment. Any sleepers from the SEC you would like to mention? Like I say, about 2 minutes or so, 2.5 minutes.
Well, another guy who he's not getting a whole lot of love, but man, I really like him. And I know there are people that are really high on him, is Jeremy Bernard, the wide receiver from Alabama. Probably in that second tier of wide receivers this year, because you've got those top guys with Carnell Tate and Jordan Tyson and Makai Lemon. And then the next tier down, your Casey Concepcion from A&M, Denzel Boston from Washington, Chris Bell from Louisville, all of those guys, kind of Chris Brazzell from Tennessee, who a lot of people really like as a vertical stretch guy.
Right.
And Bernard is one of those guys that he's kind of a jack of all trades. He does a little bit of everything well. He's got a lot of shake. He had trouble with drops at Alabama, as you probably well know. And
Yes.
That's one of the issues that people are like, oh man, can we get that out of him, right? He's a guy that I think at the pro level, he's probably best as like a number 2 to number 3 wide receiver. He's like that complimentary guy to your star guy who's gonna just, do really good against those number 2 and 3 corners. And the problem with that is at Alabama, he was the guy. Like he's what you had. And so that's why I think that's kind of one of those roles where he could be a better pro than a college player, and I think he could really take a next step. And yeah, I think there's a ton of those guys. LT Overton out of Alabama as well. Kevin Falk from Auburn, he should be in that late first round mix. As a guy who, if he'd come out last season, he's probably top 10 player. But this last season, he struggled. Obviously, we all know Auburn and all the struggles that they had. He's a guy that slipped a little bit. And so, I think he's a guy that has a chance to kind of, as I say, be a better pro than a college player and really take that next step.
Yeah, Keldrick Falk, good, big, good-looking athlete for Auburn on the edge there. Yeah, he's a guy you might take a chance on because edge rushers are so valuable to teams. But anyhow, Jeff, we're going to take a few moments and have some messages for our audience. So we're going to be right back with Jeff Bowers, NFL draft analyst and researcher for 15 years for the Ticket in Dallas, KTCK. We'll be right back after these messages with more of AP as we see it.
Sir.
Hi, I'm A.P. Steadham for Greer's Markets. If you're planning a big party or for every day, shop at Greer's for delicious food, beverages, and snacks. Save time and money by checking on Greers.com and use Groceries to Go to get your Greer's groceries delivered. Look at the weekly ad for more information. 29 locations in Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, serving the region since 1916. Remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it.
And we're back with AP as we see it, and our very special guest, a friend of the show for many years, Jeff Bowers, the NFL draft analyst and researcher for 15 plus years for the Ticket in Dallas, Texas, KTCK, and the Sports Narrative on the X account. Jeff, tell people exactly how they can find you. I just revealed some of the places, but how can they find you on the internet?
Yeah. Sports Narrative on X is where I'm going to be, and I'll be live tweeting the draft, of course. And then if you want to listen to our coverage, I work with the great Norm Hitzges, who has been doing draft coverage since the 1980s. When Norm first started the draft, it was in an old ballroom. AP, you might remember these days. It was the old ballroom next to Madison Square Garden.
Yes.
And he called up the NFL, called up the vice president of the NFL and said, hey, you know what? I want to do a live broadcast from the draft. And the NFL said, why? And he's like, well, it's Dallas and Cowboys fans, like they're kind of interested, and they were like, I mean, I guess. And to go from that to what it is today.
Right.
It's just so amazing to me how the draft has evolved over these years and become, complete cottage industry, and it's great. And so if you want to hear that, our coverage, you can go to the Sports Day app on your phone, the Sports Day DFW app, and that is our live feed for the ticket KTCK in Dallas. You can listen to us do the draft wall to wall. It's Cowboys heavy, so if you're a Cowboys fan, I think you can appreciate it. But cover all the teams. Norm does a great job. We have a ton of fun and laughs. It's a blast, and I've done it every year, and it's one of my favorite events to do.
I've seen you in action. You, Norm, it's great. It's awesome for those who looking to have some fun these next couple of evenings.
Yes, sir.
Jeff, speaking of the Dallas Cowboys, you were relaying some information to me about the press conference with the owner, Jerry Jones. So proceed.
Oh, yeah. We had a fun one today. So the Cowboys are doing their pre-draft press conference, which you've seen around the league. If you watch the NFL Network, all the teams have kind of done it. Their GM comes out and basically says a whole lot of nothing. They talk about their process and blah, blah, blah. Well, Jerry, he does things differently here in Dallas. So Jerry's up on the stage, and first of all, they're dropping like information bombs to go up to start with. They're talking about we're not going to re-sign George Pickens, we're going to let him play it out on the tag, and blah blah blah. Like they're dropping bombs. So don't get me wrong, this wasn't a non-event press conference,
Right.
but right there, dead in the middle, in walks Bill Clinton, former President Bill Clinton, just interrupts the middle of the press conference. And so, of course, a couple old Arkansas boys, Jerry stands up, almost trips walking over to Bill Clinton, and then just starts telling Bill about the people in the media. It's the craziest scene. Again, only in Dallas does that kind of thing happen. When you have a celebrity owner who's, doing TV shows and Papa John's commercials and all this kind of stuff. It's so wild. It's one of the things I love about covering the Cowboys is that it is the glitz and glamour. It is, like the LA franchises here for the NFL especially. They don't have it like the Lakers do and all that stuff. The New York teams kind of do.
Right.
Not like they used to, mostly because they've been terrible. But
Right.
Dallas, man, Dallas is where it's at on that type of thing. There are celebrities. You've got all the the crazy stars and the history of the rings and the craziness from the 90s on. It's great. I absolutely love it. And so yes, when Bill Clinton comes popping into your press conference, you just stop everything down and start talking to Bill. It's a normal day in Dallas.
Oh yeah. I wish I was there for that press conference. I would have
Oh, me
loved
too. How
to
amazing would that have been? Yeah, I was
ask him
on a plane back, but
I would have loved to ask them both some questions. Joint associations they've had through the years and all the stories they could.
that's like I said, a couple old Arkansas guys. That's a small knit. That's a tight knit group there, and those guys. They stick together. Jimmy Johnson was part of that same crew there, all those Arkansas guys. And so, so they stick together, those Arkansas guys.
Yeah, same era for sure. Jeff, who are some of the smart teams over the past few years, or how would you describe that to our audience? You feel that they make the right selections most of the time, because we know it's not 100%, but the people who are giving the millions of dollars to certain players,
Absolutely.
You don't survive unless you're giving it to someone who performs on the field and produces.
100%. Another famous quote about the draft was my friend Rick Goslin, and he said that he goes, "Look, there are 5 teams who know what they're doing when it comes to the draft. They've got it locked in. They know what they want. They know who they are. They have it all right. Then there are 5 teams on the other side who have no idea what they are doing. They are absolutely just guessing. They are throwing darts at a board. They don't have any idea what they're doing, what they're looking for. They are clueless. And everyone else is somewhere in between that. And that's really the best way to view the draft, right? There are teams every year, your Baltimore Ravens, your Pittsburgh Steelers, these teams that absolutely just sit back. The draft falls to them, and a great player just lands right in their lap, and they say, "Yep, that's what we're going to do." Then you have teams like the Eagles for these last few years that are aggressive, that have moved up. They make these big bold moves and
Yeah.
trades and all this stuff, and we've seen that work out. Then you have teams like the Rams who basically trade all those picks away and just say, "Man, we're good." But I think now they've kind of come to see that eventually you got to keep that pipeline moving. And so there are teams that have been, the Patriots, obviously, when they built that dynasty, was really funny about that is when you look at the way that kind of analysis goes, their top level picks didn't always work out really well. But the secret and the genius that Belichick had was he could take a player from the third, fourth, fifth round. And that guy, he's not a perfect prospect. He's not one of those
Yeah.
blue chip guys that has
No.
nothing wrong with him. He does one thing. He does one thing, and what Bill says is, I'm gonna only ask you to do that one thing. If you're a pass rusher, you might not be the biggest or the fastest. You might not be able to tackle it all. You might not be able to play run. I'm gonna ask you to rush the passer, and that's it. And that guy would be great. And then
Yeah.
he would get paid because the Patriots would let him walk, and he would get paid by some other team, and he'd be terrible. And they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, this guy's terrible." And that's because you're asking him to do all the things when he can't do all the things. And so that's the real key to, like, when you get, day one is all the glitz and the glamour and the red carpet and all the big names, all the names. Day two and day three is where you get your real meat and potatoes guys, right? Like these are your stalwart guys that you want to draft, a guy who's going to be with you for 10 plus years. Maybe he's never a superstar, but he's that glue guy. And then day three on Saturday, we get up early. We start there at noon. Norm and I always get our bagels, and we sit around with our big stack of bagels and cream cheese on them. An old timey thing from when we were in New York every year at Radio City. And that's when you really get the real strength of your draft, because you're getting guys, again, they're not perfect. They're not perfect prospects. But if you can pick that diamond out of the rough and say, I'm going to find a guy here, and that's really where you can make or break your team. And there's some guys in this draft, that are going to be in those fourth, fifth, sixth rounds that, they're going to be absolute studs. And you're going to say, oh my gosh, how did he get to the fourth round? Well, he wasn't the biggest. He wasn't the fastest. He may have had some issues, whatever. Here's a good example. In the news with Zachariah Branch, the wide receiver from Georgia, who's had his off-field problems and just had another one like last week.
Right.
Not the best of timing. But another guy also in the SEC who had a little bit of a dalliance right as the draft process went along was Dak Prescott. In the lead up to his draft, he had himself a DUI, and there was some weird circumstances around it, but that happened. He fell in the draft, fell to the last pick in the fourth round. The Cowboys took him, and the only reason the Cowboys took him is because they were trying to trade up for this kid named Paxton Lynch, who was a quarterback out of Memphis. And the Broncos outbid them for him, so they didn't get him. So then they waited, and they said, oh, man, okay, well, I guess Dak's still sitting there. And so they take him in the end of the fourth round, and he turns into Dak Prescott. And of course, Tony Romo gets the back injury. Dak Prescott starts, and he's started ever since. So it's that kind of thing. Those are the things, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. But really, the good teams are the ones who know that there's value at every pick. They know that there's value throughout the entire draft, and they know how to fill the needs that they want, looking at it in a vertical sense to say, okay, we want a cornerback and a guard and this. Well, if we take the corner here because there happens to be one, well, now we need to get the guard here and the edge rusher here or whatever. And that's what makes it so much fun, is all of a sudden, as I said, some team takes a random player, and all of a sudden, Reuben Bain Jr. lands in your lap with the 12th pick in the Cowboys, which is very possible, by the way. And it's like, oh my gosh, we're not passing up on Reuben Bain Jr., right? And so now I've taken him. Okay, well, now how am I going to get my safety? How am I going to get, this? And so, I still need a linebacker. And so you start doing those things. I think this draft is going to be so much fun there are tons of teams that want to trade up, tons of teams with multiple first round picks, like the Jets, the Cowboys, the Chiefs, and a lot of these teams that have been these stalwart franchises, like the Ravens, like the Chiefs, are drafting way higher than normal because they've had a down year. And so,
for sure.
so seeing how aggressive those teams want to be to get back on top, versus the teams at the top who are trying to get picks for next year's draft, which is supposed to be amazing because it's going to have all the quarterbacks and Lenora Sellers and Arch Manning and, this and that. And so that's what's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Jeff Bowers, NFL draft analyst and researcher for 15 plus years for the Ticket in Dallas, KTCK. Jeff, we want to thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And we'll be right back after these messages with more of AP as we see it.
Hi, I'm A.P. Steadham for Greer's Markets. If you're planning a big party or for every day, shop at Greer's for delicious food, beverages, and snacks. Save time and money by checking on Greers.com and use Groceries to Go to get your Greer's groceries delivered. Look at the weekly ad for more information. 29 locations in Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, serving the region since 1916. Remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it.
And we're back with AP as we see it, and we'd like to thank our guest, Jeff Bowers, NFL draft analyst, researcher for 15 years plus for the Ticket in Dallas, KTCK. We really thank him for all his comments, his observations, and thoughts. Thank you very much, Jeff, and always look forward to your perspective on the NFL draft. Anyhow, one other item about the NFL draft now that's come into play with the transfers and the NIL is many of these players now, they have money. And we all know that money exposes your character. So that's a question that I think that some of the scouts are asking players, what have you done with the money you've earned through name, image, and likeness? And I think that's a very telltale situation if you can ask the right questions to all the prospects about what they've done with their money. Have some invested? Have you spent it wisely? I think that's a good way to find out about these prospects. So I think it's just something different. I think we mention the word transfer and those three letters NIL on our show every week because it's so critical to college athletics now, specifically college football and basketball, and the revenue that people are requesting to sign with schools. But anyway, I think that's something different. But anyhow, as I mentioned, the NIL and the transfer portal, I think it will change the dynamics for schools such as Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, Kentucky, just to name a few in the conference. Will they have more players drafted in the next 5 years? We'll have to follow that closely and to see if the other schools who are normally at the top, will those numbers remain approximately around the same, or will it have a slight drop, a severe drop or not? But just to give you an example, let's look at two schools, Texas and Oklahoma, who came into the league a couple years ago. Texas in 2025 had 12 draftees. That set a record for University of Texas. And let's go back now. 24, it was 11. That's a healthy number. 2023, only 5. Believe it or not, this is just 2022, not very long ago. 0 student athletes, football players, were selected from the University of Texas. Think about that. University of Texas, with 1,200 plus high schools, the University of Texas had 0 draftees in 2022. And they went to that and had the record in 2025. 2021, it was 5. Looking at Oklahoma last year, only 2. 2 were selected. The year before in 24 was 3. The year in 2023 was 25. 22 was 7, and 21 was 5. I think you're going to see that number increase at a school like Oklahoma, for instance. Okay. I think you're going to see more players selected from the University of Oklahoma as they ascend and are able to compete, Brent Venables and company. Let's look at the SEC versus the Big Ten, because those are the two biggest rivals, I think, with the power conferences. The SEC, like I said, 79 last year, set a record, 71 in the Big Ten. They're getting close. Of course, they have a few more teams. They have 18 teams. The SEC just has a 16. In 2024, believe it or not, only 42 from the Big Ten. That was the third highest with the Power Four conferences. It wasn't even in second place. That time, the SEC had 59. So the SEC went from 59 to 79. Okay, 2023, 55 by the Big Ten, 62 by the SEC. 2022, 48 by the Big Ten, 65. There was a wide discrepancy there. 17. So that's a big number, 65. And then the SEC had 65 the year before. That was the record set at the time in 22 and 21. The Big Ten had only 44. So those numbers are jumping. We see follow the money, as they say, follow the money, and you're probably going to see the Big Ten getting closer to equaling or surpassing, I think, the SEC. But they have a few more teams. Let's take that into consideration as well. But they're acquiring more talent because of the name, image, and likeness, and they have deep pockets. And let's take a school like outside of the SEC, Indiana. Who knew until we found out last year that they have the biggest alumni association in America? I never would have thought it was Indiana. I would think University of Texas, University of Michigan, UCLA, Penn State, Ohio State, some other schools, but I never would have thought Indiana. So they have an alumni group that's been waiting for 50 years to have a good football team. So I think they're on the ascent. Last 2 years, they won that title, 16-0. I don't think that's changing anytime soon because they have tremendous leadership with Curt Cignetti. So anyway, the next topic, we want to continue our discussion of that 5 years to play 5. And that's an executive order that they're trying to implement for the 26-27 season. I would say, and there's very limited exceptions, and we'll discuss those exceptions. They are military service, if you're on a religious mission, or you're pregnant. So they consider the female perspective as well. But that's a very limited situation where you could have an exception to that 5 years to play 5. And it begins when you either turn 19 or you graduate high school. So, but I think there's going to be a plethora of lawsuits challenging that 5 for 5 rule. I just think that now that it's occurred these last several years, players competing in their 6th year, 7th year, 8th year, even the 9th year. And I don't even know how that happens, to tell you the truth. I'd have to really do some in-depth research how you're in your 9th year of college and you're still playing a competitive sport. And I just don't see. But I feel there is a limited number of years probably that you should have, but you have to leave open, I think, more exceptions than the ones that I just mentioned. And so, but it'll be challenged, and maybe it'll be derived finally by all those court challenges, and they can figure out an acceptable number for student athletes to compete. Another thing that's on the agenda that we've always, keeping watch is the college football playoff debate. The SEC wants 16, the Big Ten wants 24. You see the drum banging loudly for the 24. But remember, the final answer, as we always say, is money. That's the answer. If you're trying to eliminate let's say, for instance, the SEC championship game, and you go to more teams, the 16, 24, you're probably looking at playoff games, maybe number 3 playing number 6, number 5 playing number 4 to get to the top 4 for the SEC, as an example. But I think whatever decision they arrive at in the future, hopefully it's going to be by that December 1st deadline, because it went past last season. They couldn't come to an agreement. That's the SEC and the Big Ten. We know those two commissioners have total command of the outcome of the college football playoff. They could not agree. Hopefully they have some type of compromise. I don't know. Maybe they try 16 for, let's say, 4 years, and they'll have another decision to be made after the 4 years with compromising and say, all right, the SEC, we're going to give you the 16. We're going to try your philosophy first before we jump into the 24. It would seem natural, I think, to try the 16 before you try the 24, because I don't think you'd want to compress after starting at 24 and saying, gee, we made a mistake, let's go back to 16 or 12. I think you probably start with the 16 as they went from the 4 to the 12 to the 16, then 16 to the 24. I don't think you could do it in reverse order with the 24 first, but that's my opinion. But anyhow, we hope that they come up with some decision. And if you move to that 16 or 24, more teams will be in contention. And so we always believe that college football, the great thing about that season was that every game counted. You're in a playoff every week, because if you lost a game or two or three, you were definitely probably out of the playoff situation. When there were two teams in the playoffs, four teams could make it. So, but when you have 16 or 24 teams in contention, you're going up to the last game of the season, and it's spread out around the country. There's so many teams that will be involved in the various scenarios to see if they can make the college football playoff. So, yeah, I understand that portion of it, to have more teams involved, and there's more money, and we know that's always the answer, more money, because you have to pay these coaches, have to pay the coordinators. Those prices keep jumping astronomically as well, and all the administrators around college athletics, and you're trying to support all the Olympic sports, and so. But you like to see, I guess I would like to see at least 16. I'm fine with 12, really, but if it's moving in that direction, if I had to make a choice, I say let's try the 16 for. I would give it a healthy 4 years. I wouldn't want to see just 2. I would say a healthy 4 years at 16, and see what happens. But remember, we're here at the draft, the 2026 NFL draft in Pittsburgh. And so look on our YouTube channel at AP as we see it for all our interviews that we're conducting through the week. And we look forward to another episode next week, but we really have enjoyed ourselves so far in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Like I said, it's been since December 1947 since that all's happened. But all these things are on the docket for college football and college athletics: the 5-for-5 rule, the college football playoffs, the transfer of the NIL, and how that changes college athletics, how it affects the NFL draft. It's just monumental changes in these last couple of years that everybody's had to endure and to adapt. And we all know if you adapt, those are the people that will be successful. And that's always been the story, no matter the rules, the changes in college athletics, especially the last 10 years. That's been the norm, actually, not the exception. So anyway, we want to thank you, and we look forward to another episode next week of AP as we see it.
Hi, I'm A.P. Steadham for Greer's Markets. If you're planning a big party or for every day, shop at Greer's for delicious food, beverages, and snacks. Save time and money by checking on Greers.com and use Groceries to Go to get your Greer's groceries delivered. Look at the weekly ad for more information. 29 locations in Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, serving the region since 1916. Remember, Greer's got it. They guarantee it.